The door didn't just open, it surrendered. Weston Ashford Kincaid's shoulder hit the wood with the weight of a man who had already decided, somewhere between the highway and this quiet street in the suburbs of Hartford, that nothing inside this house was going to stop him. Not the lock, not the porch light still glowing at 7 in the morning, not the soft lace curtain swaying in the front window, like a ghost waving him away. He stepped inside with rain still dripping from the hem of his coat. His jaw locked, a folder of printed photographs crushed against his ribs by one clenched fist. His heart was pounding a rhythm he hadn't felt since the night his father died. That specific, metallic hammering that tells a man he is about to do something he cannot undo. And then he stopped. He stopped so suddenly that the folder slipped an inch down his side, and one photograph, a blurry shot of Jaleesa Monroe Whitfield standing in a hospital parking lot with a man's arm around her shoulders, drifted to the hardwood floor like a falling leaf, because there she was, standing at the far end of the hallway, framed by the soft yellow light of a kitchen doorway, wearing a faded gray nursing robe and mismatched socks. Her hair was pulled back into the kind of hasty bun a woman only makes when she has been awake for most of the night. Her eyes were wide, her lips parted in a small silent word that she never got to finish, and in her arms, held carefully against her chest, wrapped in a pale pink blanket embroidered with tiny white stars, was a newborn baby. The baby was sleeping. One impossibly small fist was curled against Jaleesa's collarbone. A tuft of dark, soft hair peeked out from under the blanket's edge. The infant couldn't have been more than 3 weeks old. Weston's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Every word he had rehearsed in the car, every accusation, every cutting line, every piece of proof he was going to wave in her face, evaporated. His rage, which had been a living animal in his chest for the past 18 hours, went completely, terrifyingly still. Jaleesa didn't move. She didn't reach for her phone. She didn't scream. She just stood there in her own hallway, in the house she had bought with her own money, holding her baby, and looked at the man she had once loved, the man she had once been married to, as if he were a stranger who had wandered in from a different life. "Weston," she whispered. That one word, her voice worn thin with exhaustion and something older than anger, cracked something in him, because he recognized the way she said his name. It was the same way she had said it on the morning he signed the divorce papers without looking at her, the same way she had said it on the night his sister Margaret had stood in their living room and told them both that love wasn't enough to survive what was coming. He took one step forward. Jaleesa took one step back, her arm tightening around the baby, and that tiny, instinctive gesture, a mother shielding her child from the child's own father, was the moment Weston Kincaid realized something was terribly, catastrophically wrong with the last 2 years of his life. He had come here believing she had destroyed him. He was about to find out that someone else had destroyed them both. But before we go any further, before we step into the rewind, and I tell you how a billionaire ended up breaking down the door of the woman he once vowed to protect, if you're already feeling this story in your chest, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button and tap the bell. What you're about to hear isn't just a love story. It's a story about how the people closest to us can plant lies so carefully, so patiently, that we water them with our own hands for years before we ever realize we're the ones who grew the poison. Stay with me, because the baby in Jaleesa's arms is only the first secret. To understand why Weston Ashford Kincaid came to that doorway with the face of a man ready to end a life, we have to go back to a Tuesday morning, 18 hours before he broke in. Weston was 41 years old. He was the chief executive of Kincaid Ashford Holdings, a private banking and investment group his great-grandfather had founded in Boston in the 1920s. The family money was old, the kind of wealth that didn't announce itself with gold watches or loud cars but whispered through the quiet authority of 4-story brownstones, handwritten correspondence, and boardrooms where decisions were made by a nod rather than a vote. Weston had inherited the seat at the head of the table when his father passed 9 years earlier, and he had spent every year since trying to prove he deserved it. He was a disciplined man. He ran 6 miles before dawn. He read 2 newspapers at breakfast. He had a standing Thursday lunch with his mother at a club where the dining room had not changed in 60 years, and for a long time, the thing he was most disciplined about was his heartbreak. Because 2 years ago, Weston had divorced his wife. Her name was Jaleesa Monroe Whitfield, She had been 29 when they met, a senior project manager at a Hartford architecture firm his family's bank had hired to restore a historic building. She had walked into his conference room in a camel-colored coat with a roll of drawings under her arm, and she had not flinched when he asked her hard questions about load-bearing walls and quarterly overrun projections. She had answered every single one of them, while calmly pouring herself a cup of coffee. Weston had been taught by his father that the most dangerous woman in any room is the one who does not need to be there. Jaleesa had not needed to be there. She had earned her seat, and he had fallen in love with her, slowly, and then all at once, over the 11 months of that restoration project. They married 18 months after they met, a small ceremony. Her mother cried. His mother was polite. His sister Margaret smiled in every photograph, and gave a toast about the importance of family continuity that Weston, in the moment, thought was sweet. He would later realize it was a warning. For 3 years they were happy in the way that only people who married late and deliberately can be happy. Quiet dinners, travel without itineraries, long Sunday mornings in bed with coffee and the crossword. Jaleesa kept her career. Weston learned to cook 2 things well. They talked, cautiously at first, and then openly, about children. And then, in the 4th year, it began to come apart. It started with small things. A rumor at a charity gala that Jaleesa had been seen having lunch with a man from her firm, a whispered conversation Weston walked in on between his mother and Margaret that stopped the moment he entered the room. A late-night phone call to Jaleesa from an unknown number that she claimed was a wrong number, but could not fully explain. And then, 6 months before the divorce, the photograph. It arrived in a plain manila envelope on Weston's desk at the bank. Inside was a single printed image, Jaleesa, in a hotel lobby in Boston, standing beside a man Weston did not recognize. The man's hand was on the small of her back. Her head was tilted toward him, laughing. There was no note. Weston had stared at that photograph for 45 minutes before he put it in his desk drawer. He had not shown it to Jaleesa. He had not asked her about it, because a small, cowardly voice in him had said, "If you ask, and she lies, you will never trust her again. And if you ask, and she tells the truth, you will lose her anyway. So do not ask." That was his first mistake. His second mistake was listening, in the months that followed, to his sister Margaret. Margaret Kincaid Holloway was 6 years older than Weston. She was the daughter of their father's first marriage, and she had grown up in the years before the Kincaid fortune had fully stabilized, the years when their father had been a hungry, scrambling young banker with a terrified young wife and a daughter he was too busy to notice. Margaret had inherited the hunger. She had not inherited the chair at the head of the table. When their father died and Weston took the company, Margaret had been given a seat on the board and a substantial trust and the kind of smile that older half-siblings give younger ones at funerals, the smile that says, "I understand. I forgive you for being the favorite." She did not forgive. But Weston, who loved his sister the way quiet men love difficult family, with loyalty and blind spots in equal measure, did not see it. So when Margaret began, gently at first, to ask him questions about Jaleesa, he answered them. When she began to mention, casually, that a friend of hers had seen Jaleesa at a certain restaurant with a certain man, he listened. When she began to suggest, with the careful reluctance of a woman who did not want to hurt her brother, that perhaps Jaleesa had married him for reasons that were not entirely about love, he let the words sit in him and grow roots. And when, one rainy Thursday, Margaret sat down across from him in his office and placed on his desk a folder containing bank statements, text message screenshots.
"The baby is yours, Weston. Her name is Amara."
"I never lied to you."
Shots, and 2 more photographs, all of them showing Jaleesa in what appeared to be compromising situations with the same unidentified man. Weston did not ask where the folder had come from. He did not ask why the text message screenshots did not show Jaleesa's phone number at the top. He did not ask why the bank statements were from an account he had never seen Jaleesa use. He just looked at the evidence, and he felt the floor of his marriage fall out from under him. Weston confronted Jaleesa on a Sunday evening in October. She had just come back from a run. She was standing in the kitchen of their brownstone on Beacon Hill, drinking water from a blue glass, still in her running clothes, when he walked in and put the folder on the counter between them. She looked at the folder. She looked at him. And something in her face, in that first half-second, went very, very still. Weston would remember that half-second for the rest of his life, because he would mistake it then for guilt. It was not guilt, it was recognition. Jaleesa had seen that particular manila folder before, or one very much like it. She had seen it in her husband's sister's hand 2 weeks earlier, in the parking lot of a grocery store, when Margaret had approached her with a cold, conversational smile and said, "I think it's time you and I had a talk about what's best for Weston." Jaleesa had refused that talk. She had walked away. She had not told Weston, because she had been pregnant for 3 weeks, and she had wanted to tell him about the baby first. On a weekend, over breakfast, in the right way, she had not gotten the chance. "What is this?" Jaleesa asked, her voice steady. "You tell me," Weston said. His voice was not steady. His voice was a man's voice, trying to hold together something already broken. She opened the folder. She looked at the photographs. She looked at the bank statements. She looked at the text messages. And then she looked up at him, and she said the only thing she could have said, the only thing that was actually true. "Weston, none of this is real." He laughed. It was an ugly laugh. It was not a laugh he recognized. "None of it is real," he repeated. "Jaleesa, I have pictures." "You have photographs," she said. "You don't have pictures of anything that happened." "Who is he?" "I don't know him." "Jaleesa, I don't know him, Weston." Her voice cracked for the first time. "I have never been in that hotel. I have never had lunch with that man. That bank account is not mine. Those text messages were not sent from my phone. If you sit down right now and let me show you my actual phone and my actual bank statements and my actual calendar, I can prove every single one of these things is fabricated." He should have sat down. He should have asked her for her phone. But the small, cowardly voice from 6 months earlier was back, and it was louder now, and it was saying, "If she's telling the truth, you will have to apologize for the worst thing you've ever done. If she's lying, you will look like a fool for believing her. So do not sit down. Do not ask. Just end it." "I want a divorce," Weston said. Jaleesa's hand, holding the blue glass, began to tremble, just slightly, just at the rim. She did not beg. She did not cry. She did not tell him about the baby. She set the glass down on the counter very carefully, as if she were afraid that if she set it down any harder, she would shatter it. And then she looked at him, her husband of 4 years, the man she had chosen out of every other man in the world, and she said, "Then you don't deserve to know the truth." She turned, she walked out of the kitchen, she went upstairs, and by the time Weston climbed the stairs to follow her, 45 minutes later, his rage having finally burned down to the first ashes of doubt, she was gone. Her suitcase was gone, her laptop was gone, and on the pillow of their bed, she had left her wedding ring and a single folded note. The note said, "I hope, one day, you find out who really hated us. Because it wasn't me." The divorce was brutal, and it was quick, which is what the wealthy mean when they say a divorce was civilized. Jaleesa did not ask for money. She did not ask for the brownstone. She did not ask for a settlement. Her lawyer, a formidable woman named Patricia Oduya, sent a single letter to Weston's lawyer stating that Mrs. Whitfield, she had taken her maiden name back before the ink on the filing was dry, required nothing from Mr. Kincaid, except the return of a small wooden box of personal effects and the execution of a non-disclosure agreement protecting both parties from future public comment. Weston's lawyers had been baffled. Weston's mother had been relieved. Margaret had called it very dignified, all things considered. Weston had signed the papers on a Friday morning in December. He had not looked at the signature line. He had simply signed, because looking at it would have made it real. He had expected to feel vindicated. He had felt instead a vast, specific emptiness. The kind of emptiness that does not feel like sadness in the moment, but feels like the absence of a sound you used to hear every day without noticing. For the next 14 months, Weston threw himself into the bank. He acquired 2 smaller competitors. He took Kincaid Ashford Holdings into a new market in Singapore. He gave an interview to a prestigious financial magazine in which he talked about resilience and legacy and the importance of personal discipline. and he posed for a cover photograph in a dark gray suit in front of a window, and he did not smile, and in the quiet of his empty brownstone on Beacon Hill, at night, alone, he sometimes took out the wooden box of personal effects Jaleesa had asked for. He had never sent it, and he went through its contents. Her grandmother's thimble, a small seashell from a beach in Maine, a pressed flower from a botanical garden in Kyoto, a ticket stub from a jazz club in New Orleans where they had danced badly and laughed too loudly, a photograph of the two of them at a friend's wedding, her head on his shoulder, both of them blurry from laughter. He did not know why he kept the box. He told himself it was because he had not found the right moment to send it. He was lying to himself. And here is the first thing I want you to sit with, because this is where the story starts to teach us something real. The deepest damage in a marriage rarely comes from the big, loud accusations. It comes from the small, cowardly silences. The moment Weston chose not to ask about the first photograph. The moment Jaleesa chose not to tell him about Margaret in the parking lot. The moment he signed the papers without looking. The moment she left without fighting. Every one of those silences was a choice to protect the self at the cost of the truth. And every couple that falls apart because of a third party's lie, and there are more of them than you would ever believe, falls apart in exactly that pattern, not because the lie is convincing, because the silence around the lie is louder than the lie itself. Remember that. We will come back to it. 18 hours before Weston broke through Jaleesa's front door, a courier delivered a second manila envelope to his office at Kincaid Ashford Holdings. It was the first Tuesday of April. The weather was unseasonably warm. Weston had just come out of a quarterly strategy meeting. His assistant, a calm young woman named Ingrid, placed the envelope on his desk with a small, careful frown. "No return address," she said. "Hand delivered." The security desk didn't get a name. Weston looked at the envelope. It was identical to the first one, the one that had arrived on his desk nearly 3 years ago. Same weight, same handwriting in blue ink, same small smudge in the lower right corner. His stomach turned. He waited until Ingrid had closed the door behind her. Then he opened it. Inside were 3 items. The first was a photograph, recent, clearly taken in the last few weeks, of Jaleesa standing on the porch of a modest 2-story house he did not recognize, accepting what appeared to be a large stack of cash from a tall, broad-shouldered man with his back to the camera. The time stamp on the photograph was 4 months earlier. The second was a printed bank statement showing regular monthly deposits of $47,000 into an account in Jaleesa's name from an LLC he had never heard of. The third was a short, typewritten note. It read, "She's been taking his money for 2 years. The child is part of the arrangement. Thought you should know. A friend." Weston read the note 3 times, and something inside him, which had been holding together by sheer discipline for 2 years, something he had been telling himself was healing or acceptance or peace, finally broke, because the note said the child. She had a child. He had not known. He had not been told. He had gone to 3 different sources in the last 2 years. An old college friend who still socialized in Hartford, a private investigator he had hired once and then fired out of shame, and his own cousin who worked in commercial real estate, and every one of them had told him the same thing. Jaleesa is fine. She is working. She keeps to herself. She has not remarried. She lives quietly. None of them had mentioned a child, which meant either no one knew, or someone had been very careful not to let him know. Weston sat at his desk for a long time. He did not think clearly. That is the honest thing to admit. He had spent 2 years telling himself he was over her, and in 45 seconds, with 1 photograph and 1 typewritten line, he discovered that he had never been over her for a single day, and the thing he was actually over was his own ability to pretend otherwise. He thought about the man in the photograph, whose face he could not see. He thought about the $47,000 a month. He thought about the child. He thought about his sister Margaret, who had told him, the week he signed the divorce papers, that Jaleesa was exactly the kind of woman who would land on her feet, financially speaking. And somewhere in that long, hot, humming silence in his office, Weston Ashford Kincaid made a terrible decision. He decided to go and confront her himself, not with lawyers, not with letters, not with the restraint his father had taught him, but with his own body, at her door, at first light the next morning. because the part of him that was a billionaire and a disciplined man had been completely overtaken by the part of him that was just a man who had been lied to, or believed he had been lied to. For 2 years, he drove himself. He did not tell his driver. He did not tell his mother. He did not tell Margaret, although he did, out of some instinct he did not examine, send her a single text message at 11 o'clock that night. "I know about the child." Margaret did not reply. He would remember that too. If you're still with me, and I hope you are, because this is where it gets heavy, tap that like button. Let me know you're here. Because what happens next is the moment where one man's anger walks into a room and meets a truth he was never prepared for. And the truth is going to cost him everything he thought he knew about his own family. Share this with someone who has ever been lied to by the person who claimed to love them most. They'll understand why this story matters. So we come back now to the doorway. Weston drove through the night. He did not sleep. He stopped once, at a gas station outside Worcester, and he stood in the fluorescent light of the men's room and looked at himself in the mirror and did not recognize the face looking back. He arrived at Jaleesa's street at 6:47 in the morning. The house was a modest colonial, white clapboard, black shutters, a small garden with the first green shoots of spring pushing through the dirt. It was not the kind of house a woman taking $47,000 a month from a secret benefactor would live in. That was the first thing that should have given him pause. It did not. He sat in his car for 11 minutes. He watched the porch light come on. He watched a figure move past the front window. Small, female, moving slowly, the way a woman moves when she has a child in her arms. And then he got out of the car, and he walked up the path, and he knocked. No one answered. He knocked again, harder. Inside the house, he heard a woman's voice, Jaleesa's voice, unmistakable. Say quietly, "Please, baby, please, not now, please." She was not talking to him. She was talking to the infant. Weston's shoulder hit the door. And now, we are here. He is standing in her hallway. A photograph has fallen from his folder to the hardwood floor. Jaleesa is standing at the kitchen doorway, holding a newborn wrapped in a pink blanket embroidered with tiny white stars, and she has just stepped backward with the instinctive motion of a mother protecting her child from its own father. Weston's first coherent thought is, "The baby has my hair." The tuft of dark hair peeking out of the blanket is not just dark, it is a very specific color. It is the color of his own mother's hair in every photograph from her 20s. It is the color every Kincaid baby has been born with for 4 generations, a particular shade between chestnut and black, almost inky in some lights. The baby is 3 weeks old, maybe 4. He was married to her. He left her 2 years ago. But Jaleesa would not be the first woman in the history of the world to discover she was pregnant after a divorce she did not want. And she would not be the first woman to decide, in the wreckage of being discarded by a man who did not believe her, that the man did not deserve to know. Weston opens his mouth. He closes it. He opens it again. "Jaleesa," he says. His voice comes out like a man who has not spoken in weeks. She does not answer. She does not move. The baby stirs. A tiny, soft, bird-like sound. Jaleesa closes her eyes for a single second, the way a woman closes her eyes when she is trying very hard not to cry in front of someone she no longer trusts to see her cry. And then she opens them again, and her voice, when it comes, is low and even and almost gentle. "Weston, you need to leave." "Whose baby is that?" "You need to leave my house." "Jaleesa, whose baby?" She does not answer, and in the silence, Weston looks down at the photograph that has fallen from the folder. He sees Jaleesa on a porch, a man's back turned to the camera, cash changing hands. He thinks, that is the man. And then he thinks, because he is a man who has been trained his whole life to read financial documents carefully, no, that is not how a mistress accepts money. That is how a contractor accepts payment. That's a roll of bills in his left hand, not hers. He's handing her the money. He's not receiving it. He kneels slowly. He picks up the photograph. He looks at it again. The man's shoulders are broad. The man is wearing a dark work jacket. Through the open front door of the house in the photograph, behind the man, Weston can see a half-finished nursery, a crib partially assembled, a tin of paint on the floor, a drop cloth folded over the windowsill. The man is not her lover. The man is her contractor. She was paying him. Oh my God, Weston says, very quietly. Jaleesa watches him understand. She does not help him understand. She does not rescue him. She just holds her baby, and she watches the man who once threw her away begin, for the first time, to imagine the shape of the lie he had swallowed. It takes a long time for Weston to speak again. He does not know what to do with his hands. He puts the photograph back in the folder. He puts the folder on the hall console table. He takes off his coat, because it is suddenly, unbearably hot, and he lays the coat across the back of a chair. Jaleesa does not move. She has not sat down. She has not offered him coffee. 2 years ago, she would have offered him coffee before anything else, because she was that kind of woman. The kind who fed people she was furious with. She is not offering him coffee now. That alone, more than the baby, tells him how far away she has gone. Can I sit down? Weston says. No, Jaleesa says. Jaleesa, you don't get to sit down in my house. Please. It is the word please that does something to her face. Weston has never said please to her in the whole long history of their knowing each other, because he is a man of old money and old habits, and please was a word his father taught him was for people who had not yet earned what they were asking for. He has not earned this. He knows it. He is asking anyway. Jaleesa closes her eyes again. The baby, Amara, her name is Amara. He does not know this yet, makes another small sound against her collarbone. Jaleesa adjusts the blanket with one hand, automatic, tender. Kitchen, she says finally. Not the living room. The kitchen. And you stay on the other side of the island. They walk in single file down the hallway. The kitchen is bright, small, clean, in the way small houses are clean when their owners care about them. There is a high chair in one corner that has not been used yet. There is a pile of unfolded laundry on one of the chairs, tiny pastel onesies on top. There is a bottle warmer on the counter and a framed photograph on the windowsill that Weston does not recognize. An older black woman with her arms around a laughing younger Jaleesa, both of them in sun hats somewhere green. Jaleesa sits down at the small table in the corner with the baby. Weston stands on the other side of the kitchen island, as instructed. You have one chance, Jaleesa says. Not because I owe you one, because I am tired and I have a baby, and I do not want to spend the next year of my life being afraid that you are going to come back. Say what you came to say, then leave. Weston swallows. He tells her about the envelope. He tells her about the photograph of her on the porch. He tells her about the bank statement showing $47,000 a month from an LLC. He tells her about the note. He tells her, because he has decided somewhere in the last 2 minutes that he will never lie to her again, about the first envelope, the one from 3 years ago, the one he never asked her about. He tells her about Margaret. And Jaleesa listens. She does not interrupt. She does not cry. Her face does not change. When he is finished, she is quiet for a long time. She looks down at the baby in her arms. She kisses the baby's forehead. And then she looks up at Weston, and she says, "The house you just broke into was purchased with money from a trust my grandmother left me. The $47,000 a month is rental income from 3 commercial properties I bought in 2019 with the down payment from that same trust. The LLC on the statement is mine. I opened it 6 years ago. You signed a document acknowledging its existence the summer we got married, in a prenuptial. Financial disclosure. Your lawyer signed it too. The contractor in the photograph is a man named Rodney Beaumont. He is 62 years old. He has been building out nurseries in this neighborhood for 30 years. He is my neighbor's husband. I paid him in cash because his wife is on dialysis, and they prefer not to have large payments hit their account during the month they are negotiating with their insurance provider." She pauses. She looks at him. Her eyes are very steady. "And the baby," she says, "is yours." Weston's knees give out. He does not fall, but he catches himself on the edge of the kitchen island with both hands, and he bends forward, and for a moment, the only sound in the kitchen is his breathing, which has gone ragged and wet. "Amara," Jaleesa says, still calm. "Her name is Amara. She was born 3 weeks ago. I was 11 weeks pregnant the Sunday you put the folder on our kitchen counter." "Jaleesa, I was going to tell you the next weekend." "Jaleesa, I didn't tell you that night because I did not want my child's first knowledge of her father to be that he was told about her in the middle of the worst fight of his life. I wanted to tell you on a Saturday morning. I had bought a tiny pair of socks. I had a speech. Weston is weeping now. He is a 41-year-old man who has not cried in public since he was 7 years old at his grandfather's funeral, and he is weeping in the kitchen of his ex-wife, in front of his 3-week-old daughter, because he has just understood the size of the thing he has done. Jaleesa watches him weep. She does not comfort him. She adjusts the baby's blanket. I am not going to ask you to leave yet, she says quietly, but I am going to ask you to stop crying, because you're going to wake her up, and if you wake her up, I'm going to ask you to leave. Weston puts his hand over his mouth. He nods. He makes himself stop. After a long moment he says, Why didn't you tell me? Which time? Ever. Jaleesa is quiet. And then, because she has decided too, somewhere in the last 11 minutes, that she is tired of carrying this alone, she tells him. 3 weeks before the Sunday night in October, Jaleesa was pregnant, and she did not yet know it. She was 33 years old. She was working on the restoration of a mid-century library in Springfield. She was happy. On a Saturday afternoon, she went to a grocery store in a suburb of Hartford to pick up ingredients for a dinner she was cooking Weston. It was going to be short ribs. She had the recipe on her phone. She was reaching for a bunch of rosemary when she heard a woman's voice behind her say her name. She turned. It was Margaret. Margaret was dressed, as always, impeccably. A camel coat very similar to the one Jaleesa herself owned, a silk scarf, a small, polite smile. Jaleesa, darling, Margaret said, do you have a minute? They went out to the parking lot. It was cold. Margaret leaned against her car and said what she had come to say in the calm, measured voice of a woman who had rehearsed this conversation many times in front of a mirror. She said, My brother is going to leave you. It is going to happen in the next 2 to 3 months. I am not telling you this to be cruel. I am telling you this because I have made certain decisions about our family's future, and those decisions do not include you, and I would rather we handle this cleanly than messily. She said, You are going to receive over the next several weeks a series of documents in the mail. Some of them will be photographs. Some of them will be bank statements. I want you to understand that these documents are not addressed to you. They are addressed to Weston. He will see them before you do. I am telling you this so that when he confronts you, you will understand that nothing you say will change the outcome. He has been given a story. He will believe the story. I have known my brother his whole life. Once he decides something, he does not unwind it. She said, I am going to offer you a settlement, a substantial one. If you accept it, I will ensure that your separation from my brother happens quietly and that your professional reputation is not damaged. If you refuse it, I will ensure that your professional reputation is damaged very badly. I have already taken the liberty of speaking to 2 partners at your firm. They know that a scandal involving you and a client is possible. They have been receptive to hearing more, should the need arise. She said, finally, You seem like a practical woman. I am a practical woman. My brother is not a practical man. He is a romantic man, which is why he is so easy to destroy. You and I both know that no marriage survives what I have set in motion. You can either leave with your career intact, or you can stay and watch him leave you anyway while your life burns down. Which would you prefer? Jaleesa, standing in the parking lot of a grocery store with a bunch of rosemary in her hand, did 3 things in that order. First, she laughed. One short, sharp sound of pure disbelief. Second, she said, Margaret, I am not leaving my husband because his sister told me to. Third, and this is the thing that would haunt her for 2 years, she did not tell Weston. She did not tell him because she believed in that moment that telling him would be an act of aggression against his own family, and that the right thing to do was to wait and see, and to trust him, and to let him see for himself what his sister was. She did not understand yet that a man who has been raised inside a family can be taught not to see the family for his entire life. She did not understand that the moment a dangerous relative says he will believe the story, the dangerous relative is telling the truth, because they have been telling the story to him, in small daily doses, since he was a child. She went home. She cooked the short ribs. She told Weston she loved him. She waited. 2 weeks later, she discovered she was pregnant. 1 week after that, Weston put the folder on the counter, and Jaleesa, standing there with a blue glass in her hand, looking at the photographs Margaret had warned her about, had a single clarifying thought. If I tell him about the baby now, he will think I am using the baby to save the marriage, and any love he has for this child will be poisoned from the first breath. So she did not tell him. She left. She filed for divorce. She took nothing. She signed the non-disclosure agreement, which, in her lawyer Patricia Oduya's skilled hands, had been modified to exclude any mention of children born of the marriage. A small, precise knife of a clause Margaret's lawyers had missed. She moved to Hartford. She bought this house with her trust money. She had her baby. She named her Amara, which means grace in a language her grandmother spoke. She did not tell Weston. And she did not tell Weston, not even a week ago when Amara was born, because somewhere in the last 2 years she had come to believe that a man who could be convinced by his own sister to throw away a pregnant wife was not a man who deserved to know he had a daughter. And she had been waiting without knowing she was waiting, for the day the universe would decide whether she had been right or wrong. The universe, apparently, had decided to send Margaret's final envelope to Weston's desk on a Tuesday in April. And now Weston was in her kitchen. Take a breath with me, because I need you to feel what just happened. A woman stood in a grocery store parking lot and was told, calmly, by her husband's own sister, that her marriage was being dismantled on purpose. And she did not tell her husband, not because she didn't love him, because she was trying to protect the wrong thing. She was trying to protect the idea of his family. She was trying to protect his image of a sister she already knew, in her bones, was dangerous. There is a name for what Jaleesa was doing. Psychologists call it protective silence, and it is one of the most common ways good people hand their own lives over to the worst people in them. You do not protect someone by hiding the evidence that they are being lied to. You protect them by telling them the truth, even when the truth will cost them something they love. Write that down if you need to. I'll wait. And then if this story is sitting in your chest right now, smash that like button and tell me in the comments. Have you ever stayed silent to protect someone, only to watch that silence become the very thing that destroyed you both? Tell me. I read them. Weston is still standing on the other side of the kitchen island. He has stopped crying. His face is wet, and he has not wiped it, because he understands instinctively that wiping it would be a small act of composure, and he is not allowed composure in this room. I need, he says. His voice cracks. I need to ask you something. Jaleesa nods once. How much of this can be proven? All of it. Margaret, the parking lot, the conversation. I recorded it. Weston's head jerks up. You? I had my phone in my coat pocket, Jaleesa says. I turned on the voice memo when she asked me if I had a minute. I am the daughter of a black woman who grew up in the South in the 1970s. My mother taught me from the time I was 9 years old that when a wealthy white woman wants to talk to you alone in a parking lot, you turn on the recorder. Weston laughs. It is a broken, helpless laugh. He puts his hand over his face. Of course you did, he says. Of course you did. I never sent it to anyone. I never played it for anyone. I was not planning to use it. I kept it for myself, so that on the nights when I started to wonder whether I had imagined the whole thing, whether I had been a paranoid wife, whether my husband's sister was actually perfectly nice and I was the crazy one, I would have something I could listen to and remember what was real. Can I hear it? No. Jaleesa, not today. Maybe never. I don't know yet. You don't get to demand access to the evidence of your own wife's suffering on the same day you broke her door. Weston nods. He swallows. I want to call my lawyer, he says. Right now, from your kitchen. And I want to start the process of, oh, no. He stops. Weston, Jaleesa says. And for the first time, her voice is not level. For the first time, it is tired in a way that is old and deep. I do not need you to call your lawyer. I do not need you to take revenge on your sister on my behalf. I have built a life. I have a daughter. I have my work. I have my mother's photograph on that windowsill and a trust from my grandmother that makes me, on paper, a wealthier woman than you may have realized. I have survived you. I have survived Margaret. I do not need you to ride in and rescue me from a thing I have already rescued myself from. Then what do you need? She looks at him. I need you to go home, she says. I need you to sit in your empty brownstone on Beacon Hill, alone with a cup of coffee for 1 week. I need you to not call me. I need you to not send flowers. I need you to not hire a private investigator. I need you to not confront Margaret in a rage. I need you to not make one single impulsive decision, the way you did with the first folder, the way you did with the divorce papers, the way you did by driving here in the middle of the night. I need you, Weston, for the first time in the entire history of our knowing each other, to stop reacting. I need you to sit still and think. She looks down at Amara. And in a week, she says, I will call you, and we will have one conversation. One, about our daughter, and what happens next will depend entirely on how you spend the next 7 days. Weston did what she asked. It was the hardest thing he had ever done. It was harder than taking over the bank at 32. It was harder than burying his father. It was harder than signing the divorce papers. He drove home. He did not speak to anyone. He arrived at his brownstone at 3 p.m, and he sat on the leather sofa in his study, and he did not move for a very long time. On the first night, he did not sleep. He sat at his desk, and he wrote down, on a legal pad, every single interaction he could remember having with Margaret over the last 5 years. Every lunch, every phone call, every small offhand comment she had ever made about Jaleesa. When he looked at the list in the morning, he saw it. He saw the pattern. He saw that there had been, on average, one strategically placed poisoned remark every 12 days, for 4 years, and he had swallowed every single one of them without once asking himself where Margaret was getting her information. On the second day, he called Celeste Voss. Celeste had been his executive assistant for 6 years until she had left, abruptly, 8 months before his divorce. He had never understood why she left. She had given a polite 2-week notice and cited family reasons and had refused, kindly but firmly, his offer of a raise and a promotion. Celeste agreed to meet him at a coffee shop in the Back Bay. She arrived in a navy blue coat. She was a small, sharp-eyed woman in her 50s. She sat down across from him, and before he could say anything, she said, "You finally figured it out." Weston could not speak. Celeste told him calmly, over the course of 35 minutes, what she had seen. She had seen, over a period of 18 months, Margaret request printouts from his calendar that she had no business seeing. She had seen Margaret access his office on weekends when he was not there. She had seen Margaret once, sitting at his desk, writing a note in blue ink on cream paper very similar to the note that had accompanied the first envelope. She had seen Margaret meet, in the lobby of the bank, a man Celeste had recognized from a society page as a disgraced private investigator who had been fired from a firm the Kincaids had used in the past. Celeste had not spoken up. She had done what many women in corporate America have done when they see something wrong being done by a powerful family member of their boss. She had chosen to leave rather than to be destroyed. "I am sorry, Weston," she said. "I should have told you. I was afraid." She had already threatened 2 other women in the office that year. "You did not see it. No one saw it. She is very good at what she does." "What else?" Weston said. "Your wife was in a hotel in Boston one weekend, a real weekend. I have the records. She was there at an architectural conference. Margaret knew she was going to be there. Margaret hired the man you saw in the photograph to pose for a photograph with her in the lobby while her back was turned. It took one photograph. The man was paid $600. Your wife never knew." The text messages. "Fabricated. I can tell you the name of the man who fabricated them. He is a forensic technology consultant in Rhode Island. He was paid $9,000. The bank statements. Altered. The account existed. The deposits did not." Weston stared at her. "Why are you telling me all this now?" he said. Celeste looked at him with the patient weariness of a woman who had waited a long time to be asked this particular question. "Because my own daughter got divorced last year," she said quietly. "And in the middle of her divorce, her husband's mother did something very similar to her, not as elaborate, but the same flavor. And I watched my daughter nearly lose her mind before the truth came out, and I realized, sitting with her at her kitchen table one night, that I was complicit in the same kind of cruelty that had just happened to my own child, and that if I ever got the chance to undo a piece of it, for anyone, I was going to take it. She paused. I've been waiting for your call, Weston, for 2.5 years. I have everything documented. I have printouts, I have dates, I have the name of the investigator and the name of the technology consultant. I can walk you through all of it. You will need a lawyer you trust, and not one your sister recommends. Weston closed his eyes. Thank you.
I'm here now, sweetheart. I promise I'm not going anywhere. I'll earn this. I promise I'll earn this.
Weston closed his eyes. Thank you, he said. Do not thank me, Celeste said. I waited too long. Your daughter is almost a month old. I should have called you the day I heard you had a daughter. You knew about the baby. Everyone at Ingrid's level knows about the baby, Celeste said gently. Your ex-wife's lawyer filed a birth certificate. It is a public document. Any assistant in any law office in Hartford can pull it. I'm surprised your sister had not figured it out yet. Weston said slowly, What if she had? Celeste looked at him. Weston, she said, I think she did. On the third day, Weston did not leave his study. He sat with Celeste's words. I think she did. He thought about the timing of the second envelope. The Tuesday, the note that said the child is part of the arrangement. The fact that Margaret had not replied to his midnight text that said, I know about the child. He thought about the possibility that Margaret had not sent the second envelope to expose Jaleesa at all, that she had sent it for a different reason, that she had sent it to bait him into doing exactly what he had done, driving to Hartford in a rage, breaking into Jaleesa's house, because a man who breaks into his ex-wife's house can be destroyed in a custody hearing. A man who breaks into his ex-wife's house can be publicly disgraced. A man who breaks into his ex-wife's house can be cut from a family trust on grounds of erratic behavior and replaced, at the head of the bank, by his older, more stable, more reliable half-sister. Weston stood up from his desk very slowly. He walked to the window of his study. He looked out at the street below, and he understood, for the first time in his adult life, that the person he had trusted most in the world had spent the last 4 years trying, with exquisite patience, to take everything from him. She had already taken his wife. She had tried, with the second envelope, to take his freedom, and she had not even known, when she sent it, that she was also trying to take his daughter. On the fourth day, Weston hired a lawyer, not his family's lawyer, a woman named Imani Chen, who had been recommended to him by a college friend, and who specialized in the specific kind of case where a powerful family member turns on another. Imani listened to Weston's story for 4 hours without interrupting. At the end of it, she said, We have a lot of work to do. Do not contact your sister. Do not contact your mother. Do not contact anyone in your office, except Ingrid. We are going to start with Celeste's documentation. Then we are going to move carefully. On the 5th day, Weston began to understand something he had not understood before. He understood that the damage he had done to Jaleesa could not be repaired by a lawsuit against Margaret. He understood that no settlement, no apology, no public exposure of his sister's cruelty would give Jaleesa back the Sunday night she had stood in her own kitchen holding a blue glass while her husband told her he wanted a divorce. He understood that the work of earning back even the right to sit at Jaleesa's kitchen table was going to be the work of the rest of his life, and that there was no guarantee, none at all, that the work would succeed. And he understood, sitting alone in his study on the 5th night, that he had to do the work anyway, not because Jaleesa might forgive him, because his daughter deserved a father who had done the work, whether or not Jaleesa ever let him near her again. On the 6th day, he slept, for the first time in a week, for 8 full hours. On the 7th day, his phone rang. It was Jaleesa. Come to the house, she said. 3 o'clock. Do not bring flowers. He arrived at 2:57. He did not knock. He sat on the porch step and waited to be invited in. At 3 exactly, Jaleesa opened the door. She was holding Amara in a carrier against her chest. She looked tired. She looked beautiful. She looked, Weston thought, like a woman who had spent 7 days thinking very hard about what she wanted. Come in, she said. They sat in the kitchen again. She put water on for tea. Amara slept. I spoke to Celeste, Jaleesa said. Weston looked up, startled. She reached out to me, Jaleesa said. On the 4th day, she told me what she told you. She also sent me, at my request, every document she has. My lawyer and I have been reviewing them for 3 days. Jaleesa, I want to say something, Jaleesa said. And I want you to let me say it without interrupting. Can you do that? He nodded. She took a breath. I am not going to forgive you today. I am not going to forgive you tomorrow. I may never forgive you. You have to understand that as a fixed, permanent fact of our lives now, the thing you did, not the believing your sister, but the signing the divorce papers without looking at me, the 2 years of silence, the breaking my door down. Those are not things a person earns forgiveness for by apologizing. Those are things a person lives with every day for the rest of their life. And the degree to which you live with them well will determine the degree to which I, very slowly, let you back into the edges of my daughter's life. She paused. My daughter, not our daughter, mine, for now. You will earn in increments the right to call her our daughter, and that process will take years, not months, years. Weston nodded. I want you to know, Amara, I have decided that, not because I think you deserve it, because I think she deserves it. I think a child deserves a father who loves her, and I think watching you in this kitchen a week ago, that you are going to love her, so you will meet her. You will come on Sundays, for 1 hour, supervised by me, for the next 3 months. After 3 months we will reevaluate. You will not take her out of this house without me, until she is old enough to tell me, in her own words, that she wants to. You will not introduce her to your mother, or to Margaret, or to anyone in your family until I give explicit permission. Margaret will never, ever meet my daughter. That is not a negotiation. That is not a starting position. That is the one non-negotiable thing in this entire conversation. Margaret will never meet her, Weston said. I promise you that. I do not need your promises yet, Jaleesa said gently. I need your actions. Promises are what you gave me in a chapel 6 years ago. Actions are what I need now. He nodded. Okay. Financially, you will pay child support. The amount will be decided by our lawyers. You will not try to give me any gift beyond what is legally required until I ask. You will not buy Amara expensive things. You will not buy me expensive things. You will not attempt to buy your way out of what you did. Do you understand? Yes. Emotionally, you will not tell me that you still love me. You will not tell me that you have always loved me. You will not tell me that you made a mistake. You will not write letters. You will not leave voice messages. If, at some point, in some future I cannot currently imagine, I am ready to hear any of those things, I will ask. Until I ask, you will not say them. Do you understand? Yes. And, Margaret. She looked at him. What you do about Margaret is your business. It is your family. It is your company. I will not tell you what to do. I will only tell you this: whatever you decide, decide it for yourself, not for me, not to prove anything to me. I do not need my life's grief avenged in order to live. I have my daughter. I have my mother's photograph. I have this house. I have already survived. Whatever you do to Margaret, do it because you have decided who you want to be, not because of me. Weston was quiet for a long time. I understand, he said finally. Jaleesa nodded. She stood up. She poured the tea. She set a cup in front of him. It was the first kindness she had offered him in 2.5 years. And Weston Ashford Kincaid, billionaire, chief executive of Kincaid Ashford Holdings, a man who had been raised to believe that the greatest sign of strength was the refusal to cry, put his hands flat on the table of his ex-wife's kitchen, and he cried quietly for the second time in a week, while his 3-week-old daughter slept in a carrier on her mother's chest, and his ex-wife stood by the stove and said nothing, because there was nothing, yet, to say. Here is what I can tell you about what happened next. Weston kept his word. He came on Sundays, for 1 hour, supervised. He did not bring expensive gifts. He did not say "I love you" to Jaleesa. He held his daughter. He learned how to change her diaper under Jaleesa's watchful eye. The first time Amara smiled at him, at 6 weeks old, he put his face in his hands and shook with a silent, grateful grief that Jaleesa politely did not acknowledge. Imani Chen, his lawyer, worked quietly for 4 months before she moved. When she did, She moved all at once. Margaret was removed from the board of Kincaid Ashford Holdings on a Friday morning in August by a unanimous vote of the other board members on grounds that Weston chose not to publicize. The family, and the press, were told only that Margaret had decided to step down to pursue personal interests. Behind the closed doors of the family's lawyers, a very different conversation was had. Margaret retained her trust. She lost her seat, her influence, and the respect of every cousin and in-law who had, like Weston, spent years missing the pattern, and who were now, one by one, being shown the evidence. Margaret and Weston have not spoken since. Their mother, who knew some of what Margaret had done and pretended not to know the rest, took Margaret's side. Weston accepted this loss. He sees his mother twice a year, at Christmas and on her birthday, and those meetings are short and polite and hollow. Celeste Voss accepted a position as chief of staff at Kincaid Ashford Holdings, at Imani's quiet recommendation. Weston pays her very well. Jaleesa, when the story of Margaret's removal broke in a small column in a Hartford business paper, read it once, folded the paper, and threw it in the recycling. She did not mention it to Weston. He did not mention it to her. They understood each other on this. Amara turned 1 on a warm day in spring, 9 months later. Jaleesa invited Weston to the small birthday gathering. His mother was not invited. Margaret was not invited. Weston arrived with a single wrapped gift, a small hand-carved wooden bird made by a woodworker in Vermont, not expensive, because Jaleesa had asked him not to make it expensive. Amara held the bird in one tiny fist and laughed at it. On that evening, after the guests had gone, Jaleesa stood at the sink washing the last of the dishes, and Weston stood at the other side of the kitchen island, as he always did, and for the first time in almost a year, they talked about something other than their daughter. She asked him how work was. He told her. He asked her about the new historic preservation project she had taken on. She told him. They talked for 40 minutes. At the end of it, Jaleesa dried her hands on a towel, and she looked at him, and she said, "You've changed." Weston nodded. He did not say anything. "I don't know yet what that means for me," Jaleesa said. "I don't know if it means anything. I don't know if I will ever trust you the way I trusted you before. I don't know if I want to. I'm a different woman now, Weston. The woman who loved you is gone. The woman standing in this kitchen is someone else. And I don't know what she wants." Weston nodded again. "Take your time," he said. "I'm not going anywhere." She looked at him for a long moment. Amara, sleeping in her crib in the next room, made a small sound. They both turned their heads toward it instinctively, a shared, unconscious gesture, the gesture of two people who had, without meaning to, become parents together. Jaleesa turned back to him. "I know you're not," she said. She did not smile. She did not frown. She did not cry. She just stood there, in the kitchen of the house she had bought with her grandmother's money, with the photograph of her mother on the windowsill, with her daughter sleeping in the next room, with the man she had once married and had been betrayed by and had, to her own amazement, not entirely stopped loving, standing on the other side of the island. And the story ended, if it ended at all, in that quiet, uncertain pause. The pause of a woman deciding slowly and on her own terms whether the man across the room was someone she might, one day, many days from now, let step around the island and stand beside her. Weston watched her. Jaleesa watched him. Somewhere in Boston, a woman named Margaret Kincaid Holloway sat alone in a very expensive apartment and poured herself a glass of wine and told herself, the way people like her always tell themselves, that she had only ever been trying to protect her family. And somewhere in Hartford, in a crib decorated with a mobile of small wooden birds, a baby named Amara Monroe Whitfield slept, her dark hair curling softly against the sheet, her small chest rising and falling, entirely unaware that she had, in her first month of life, been the single thing in the world that had stopped a man at a doorway and turned him back toward himself and given him, whether or not he deserved it, whether or not he would keep it, the chance to become something other than what his family had made him, what she would do with her mother, what her mother would do with her father, what her father would do with the long, patient work of becoming a man worthy of the word. Those were all questions for a future that had not yet been written. For now, there was only the kitchen, the dish towel on the counter, the cup of tea, now cold, and the silence between two people who were not quite strangers and not quite anything else, standing in a house where, for the first time in a long time, a door had been broken not to destroy something, but to let the truth finally, painfully, gratefully, in. If you are still here with me, at the end of this story, I want to ask you something. I want to ask you to think about the Margarets in your own life. Not because every family has one, but because more families have one than will admit it. The quiet, patient, impeccably dressed person at the dinner table, whose opinions about your partner seem, somehow, to always match up suspiciously well with your worst private fears. The older sibling, the aunt, the best friend who has known you since college, the colleague who only wants what's best for you. I want to ask you to think about the silences, the times you did not ask the question, the times the person you loved did not tell you the thing they should have told you, the small, cowardly moments where one of you chose to protect the image of a relationship rather than the truth of it. And I want to ask you to think about Jaleesa in the grocery store parking lot, holding a bunch of rosemary, listening to a woman she distrusted tell her exactly how her marriage was going to end. Because here is the educational thread I want you to take from this story. The thing that holds it together underneath the drama, the deepest research we have on relationship collapse, on what therapists call third-party interference, on the quiet sabotage that family members and close friends can perform on marriages, tells us something uncomfortable. It tells us that the saboteur is almost never a stranger. It is almost always someone the injured party would, if asked, describe as one of the most trusted people in their life. And the sabotage almost never succeeds through a single dramatic lie. It succeeds through the slow, patient accumulation of small, plausible poisonings, spaced out over years, delivered by someone whose position in the family makes them impossible to suspect. And it succeeds, above all, because of silence, because the injured party does not ask, because the partner does not tell, because the protective instincts of good people in bad systems are almost always pointed in the wrong direction. The antidote is not paranoia. The antidote is not suspicion. The antidote is simpler and much harder. The antidote is the willingness to ask the question that will cost you something to ask. The willingness to have the conversation that will make someone, somewhere, uncomfortable. The willingness to sit in your own kitchen with your own partner and say, "There is a thing I have been afraid to tell you because I was afraid of what it would mean." Weston did not ask. Jaleesa did not tell. And the cost of those two silences was 2 years of their lives, the first 3 weeks of their daughter's life, and a wound that will never fully heal, no matter how many Sundays Weston shows up on that porch, no matter how many cups of tea Jaleesa pours. Don't be Weston. Don't be Jaleesa. Ask. Tell, even when it costs you. Especially when it costs you. If this story moved you, if any part of it made you think of someone in your own life, someone you love, someone you lost, someone you almost lost because a third party made themselves the author of a story that was not theirs to write, do me one favor. Subscribe, if you have not yet. Tap that like button, if you have not yet. And most importantly, share this with one person, not 1,000. One, the one person who needs to hear it. You know who they are. You thought of them while you were listening. And come back next week, because the next story is already on its way. And I promise you, it will find you exactly where you need to be found. Until then, take care of yourself. Take care of the people you love. And if there is a Margaret in your life, you know what to do.